So let's start by looking at Impressionism. And Impressionism is ultimately the art of industrialized, urbanized Paris. It is very, very French. It is very, very Parisian, and it tends to be surprisingly urban when you consider all of the paintings that we see of, country landscapes and everything else. So it's characterized by a concern with depicting the visual impression of the moment, what I will refer to as capturing a fleeting moment. They will focus on the study of light and the study of color. So they will represent an attempt to capture a fleeting moment. And when I say a fleeting moment, usually it's the kind of moment that won't repeat. For example, a dance hall where you won't have the same people in the same place at any time in the future. They will also try and convey the elusive and impermanent nature of images and conditions. So, of course, things are changing all the time. Lighting is changing. Colors are changing. If you sit there and stare at the same tree all day, you'll never see the same exact color scheme. So, how do we really begin to understand this? The best way to understand Impressionism is, via science. Impressionism isn't interested in creating a finished piece. In fact, most of these would be considered studies. They're experiments. They're trying to capture those three things: a fleeting moment, they're trying to study light, and they're trying to study color. You notice I'm never saying anything that would reflect a finished product. And so you have to understand it that way. You have to understand these as studies, as experiments, trying to develop the best way to reflect the world around them, to capture the world around them. One of the key elements there is going to be the use of color theory. And I'm going to touch on this really briefly. Hopefully, if you're in an art studio major or graphic design, you're going to have a lot more of this and in a lot more detail in another class. But to give you some basics that we'll be using, we have contrasting colors, such as red and green. These are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. You put them right next to each other, especially if you match the tone just right, and you get a line in between that seems to vibrate. And I actually shortened this line with my figure because I had complaints that this slide actually causes migraines. And when I use this slide in the classroom, I invariably walk in front of it, turn around, and one eye is facing the projector with full-on red, one eye with green, and you will get an instant migraine. The brain just doesn't play well with contrasting colors, and this could be orange and blue, this could be violet and yellow. Here I just happen to be using red and green. And if you happen to match the value and tone of both really, really well, you get that effect of vibration and the incredible migraine that goes with it. Now we also have primary and secondary colors. So primary colors, red, blue, yellow, basically colors that you cannot mix. In other words, I cannot create red. I have to get red. I have to buy red. And then we have orange, violet, green, which are secondary colors. Really any color that you can think of by mixing these three primaries would be a secondary color. In the center, you notice if you mix all colors, it's not black, it's actually neutral gray. And that's if you perfectly proportion colors where you have a perfect balance of pigment in each one, you should get neutral gray. Now, we will also see the idea of tertiary colors that are a third of the way around the color wheel. You can also have analogous colors, three colors that are next to each other. Guys, if you're going to paint an apartment or you're looking for a color scheme for anything, honestly, get a color wheel, pick three colors next to each other. They will always create a perfect color scheme. If you pick three that are across from each other, it's interesting. They will go together at times. Don't ever pick two that are across that are complementary because they will clash with one another. But they do one other thing. If I take colors that are across from one another, one will be invariably warm and one will be invariably cool. Cool colors are green, blue, violet. Warm colors, yellow, orange, red. Why is this important? Well, as you're going to see, many of these artists will use this as their basis of color theory. For example, if I use red highlights in a portrait, I want green as my shadow. I want two complementary colors. I'm going to mix them with other things so they don't clash, but it's going to allow me to create warm highlights and cool shadows, or cool highlights and warm shadows. If you're ever doing photography, that's going to be really important. You want warm highlights and cool shadows, or the other way around. The other way around, by the way, tends to stand out more. People really glom onto it very, very quickly. So these various theories are going to be used quite a bit. These various theories are going to be used quite a bit by the Impressionists, trying to capture that fleeting moment and study light and color. And that's pretty much what they're doing, experimenting.